Good morning. There's still a few seats up here. I'm Jonathan Phanton, president of the MacArthur Foundation, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today as we release the recommendations and share the vision of the International Commission on Education for Sustainable Development Practice. As president of MacArthur, every year I write more than 100 smart people all around the world, asking them to identify trends, needs, or challenges that the foundation might address. We call it our New Ideas process. In 2006, John MacArthur, chief executive now of the Millennium Promise, alerted us to the growing range of skills needed by development professionals in everything from the natural sciences to public health, economics to management, and suggested that we should look at how to improve training in this field. And that idea resonated with the MacArthur board and staff because of our large commitment to working in developing countries. MacArthur dedicates about 40% of its philanthropy abroad, working in 60 countries on conservation, population, human rights, migration, peace and security, and more. The alleviation of poverty through sustainable development is central to our hopes for a more just and peaceful world. And we understand the critical role of well-trained development professionals in achieving that goal. Now, we knew of the Earth Institute through grants that we made to support its work on the UN Millennium Project and to the Millennium Villages to improve reproductive health. MacArthur has mounted a major initiative to advance progress towards MDG number 5, reducing maternal mortality by 75%. So we knew the Earth Institute, and of course we have had great respect for Jeffrey Sachs and John MacArthur, I should say no relation. We've had respect for their the member of the audience just said, unfortunately for him. But for us too, because we'd be proud to have John as part of our family. In any case, we knew them, we had respect for them, we knew of their passion, their experience, their global perspective and networks, all of which made them ideal to be leaders of this commission. So creating the commission to study the way development professionals are trained was an easy case to make to the board of the MacArthur Foundation. Our model was the Flexner Report of 1910 that examined America's system of medical education, galvanizing deep systemic changes and establishing norms that are still in place today. These included the institution of the standard 4-year medical degree, including 2 years of classroom training in the sciences and 2 years of clinical training. And as we thought about that analogy, medical education, training, development professionals, we were struck by a discrepancy. While doctors must complete a 4-year course of study that includes a deep clinical experience followed by an internship, typical development programs average only 2 years with a light clinical experience, if any at all. And yet decisions made by development professionals can affect hundreds of millions of lives, not just one life at a time, and literally make the difference between life and death. And so our board enthusiastically voted to establish the commission. A member of our staff, Melena Novi-Marks, an international development economist, served on the commission and kept MacArthur closely tied in to the deliberations. Jeff and John assembled an all-star cast, scholars and practitioners from 5 continents, representing fields from economics to climate change, public health, agronomy, and much more. And like Flexner before it, the commission consulted broadly, holding meetings on 5 continents, and through these conversations, a consensus about the way forward took shape. So this report reflects the best of global thinking in the field. It is not a theoretical piece fashioned here in New York reflecting some northern template, but rather is a joint product of scholars and practitioners all over the world. Its core principles were tested along the way through a global classroom in a course which Commission members taught to over 300 students in 11 countries. And the Commission's efforts have helped galvanize a strong and growing network of institutions committed to the recommendations that we're about to announce. Indeed, Jeff and John and I previewed the recommendations on a conference call just an hour ago, ranging from South Africa to China, India, Latin America, many places in between, just symbolizing the global nature of this enterprise. So now I would like to call on the two prime movers to tell you more about the report. Jeff will talk to us about how it can help us meet the most urgent development challenges. John will review the Commission's central findings and recommendations. And then Dr. Patchi Paccheri, chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and Freddie Quasiga, both members of the Commission, and he's the coordinator of the African Water Facility at the African Development Bank, will share their perspectives as well. I'll come back with, I think, an important announcement about how we go forward, and then we'll open up to your questions. So may I ask the four speakers to come onto the podium.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Sachs, director of the Earth Institute, and it's really an auspicious day despite the world stock markets collapsing. It's a day even more important for us because we have some very big global challenges, and I think with today's report, the opportunity to address them in a more serious way than perhaps would otherwise be the case. I'm the lucky beneficiary of John MacArthur's terrific idea of suggesting this whole enterprise, and Jonathan Phanton's terrific vision from the first moment of saying this is not only right and timely, but is of an importance like the revolution in medical science teaching that Jonathan referred to. And we are both, or all three of us, are lucky beneficiaries of a worldwide collaborative effort represented first and foremost by the members of this wonderful commission. You're going to hear from two of them, absolutely world-renowned leaders in sustainable development. I mean, the top of the game, the very utmost top of the game. But we had partnership all over the world because as we got started in the work of the Commission, universities, scholars, leaders of major international organizations from the UN agencies such as UNICEF and Veneman, or from leading NGOs, world leading NGOs, Helene Gale of CARE International, said that from an organizational point of view, this was also crucial, the challenge that we had taken on and the basic idea. The basic idea is that we need to professionalize the training in sustainable development with some new core concepts. And this, John and I have felt for many, many years, and together with many of the group in our work on the Millennium Development Goals. When we looked at challenges of extreme poverty, inevitably what struck us was the range of disciplinary expertise that was required to give a sound approach. Each discipline might have thought that they had an answer, and each had a piece of an answer, but the amount of cross-disciplinary understanding and collaboration is remarkably slight. I can even say, frankly, that before our own work in the Millennium Villages Project, some of our leaders who worked in villages in one sector wouldn't talk to the next sector or the next sector traditionally, so that what was happening in farming or disease control or education in the village or water in the village or business development would be viewed as disparate activities, each with a narrow focus rather than part of a synergistic and collaborative input and output. All of the issues we grapple with today in the world, and boy, the crises are coming fast and furious and becoming more and more clear in their global reach and in their urgency, whether it's energy systems, climate, food production, water crisis, financial crisis, reorganization of the real economy, building an infrastructure for sustainability in the 21st century. And make no mistake, it's not only financial crisis leading to real economy crisis, it's the real economy in food and energy, which affects finances, which then comes back to reverberate on the real economy again. All of these crises require this kind of integrative knowledge. We need the specializations, the great skills in every discipline without question. Let me be absolutely clear about that. In the end, solutions to the problems that we face will require the top science in climatology, in hydrology, in agronomy, in civil engineering, in public health control. Economists should do a much better job, let me say, from my own side of this edge of this puzzle. But we are also going to need to train a worldwide generation of new leaders that understand how to move across these areas of specialization, how to integrate them, how to have a more holistic view, both in terms of how the components fit together, but also in terms of how the world fits together. There isn't a single crisis or a single country that either starts or ends within the country itself. The United States financial crisis now turns heavily on how much global cooperation we have. And of course, viewed from the rest of the world is seeing this financial tsunami coming on top of the waves of surging energy prices, soaring food prices, growing climate shocks, and so on. So nobody can feel that they can solve problems on their own. Yet are our students all over the world properly trained to understand the global reach? And are they empowered from the start to have a global reach, a global network of contacts to be part of a global education process? The Commission rightly says, in our view, that all of this is possible. And one of the fascinating things we did in the past year, and now we're repeating this semester, is what we call the global classroom, to put in real time to the test the propositions that are at the core of the Commission ideas. The global classroom links together more than a dozen universities around the world in real-time teaching. Thanks to Frank Moretti's team at Columbia University and New Media and Learning, using these technologies to the cutting edge, we've been able to establish a seamless global curriculum, an online program once a week of high-quality lectures and question and answer of students from around the world interacting with each other, student homework and assignments that are cross-border in nature. It's all extraordinarily thrilling. And frankly, every week it gives me goosebumps to have the idea that there are hundreds of students around the world in a shared conversation. Because even from the point of view of human values and ethics, the idea that we're all in this together and we're all problem solving together is as important as any piece of technical knowledge that is assembled as well. So the core of this Commission report says cross-disciplinary and global and pooled effort. In cross-disciplinary, we focus on 4 core areas: on the physical sciences, because the physical earth processes, energy, water, engineering, climate change, food production, public health, disease transmission are vital for any single thing we want to accomplish. Second are the policy sciences, economics, political science, anthropology, that are absolutely vital to understand, of course, human organization, cooperation, conflict, violence, the very conditions of human life, but which can't be taken in isolation of the physical environment in which we live and live on an increasingly crowded planet. The third is public health, or the health sciences generally, public health, medical sciences, nutrition, which are not only a backdrop to one of our most important goals, and that's a healthy existence, but also are huge determinants of economic well-being, economic development, and even conditions of war and peace. And then the fourth area is management, actually getting something done. That's hard, but managers really are good at things that the rest of us mortals are not so good at, which is actually delivering for results, understanding basic processes of coalition formation, budgeting, finance, working towards targets, team management, and so forth. And those are core skills, of course, that are needed by a true professional in this field. So the idea is to link those four areas. The idea is to create a global network of universities linked together by actual classroom, shared curricula, a standing secretariat that will be housed at the Earth Institute and will link together, we believe, dozens of universities and international organizations participating together in what will be and must be generations of problem solving and sustainable development that are vital for our future well-being. I think the report is compelling. It's an honor to have been part of it. It's compelling because it does carry a true global message. John MacArthur now is going to talk about taking that message down to the specifics programmatically and how we're going to proceed. Then we're going to hear from two other members of the Commission on how they see it both globally and from the perspective of their regions as well, two great leaders. So let us welcome the person who really brought us here today. He had the idea, sent the letter, got us started, John MacArthur.
Thank you, Jeff and Jonathan and Patchi and Freddie. It's such a pleasure. And I also just want to point out we have another commissioner here, Dato Lee Yi Chung, who flew in from Malaysia for this event. And let me just thank Jonathan and Milena Novimarks again, who did so much to bring us to where we are. And I also want to thank Katie Murphy, who, I don't know where Katie is right now. She's in the balcony running the show. No one did more to get us to where we are today than Katie, and she, from the very get-go, got us off the ground, coordinated a global classroom, coordinated a global faculty, writ dozens of documents, including the one sitting in front of you, and we're enormously grateful for everything she's done to get us here. Just from a personal vantage point, this is a very gratifying day because so much of the challenges, as Jeff was just saying, of sustainable development are utterly complicated, utterly requiring teamwork, global problem solving, and so forth, but in my own experience, extremely practical, and often much more practical than we understand, speaking from the vantage point of our own disciplines. I'm a macroeconomist, and the day I got the email, actually, from Jonathan originally, a couple of years ago, I had just been with an African finance minister and his permanent secretary, and we were talking about disease control in the country. And I was explaining the basics of malaria control to the finance ministry's leadership. And I'm a macroeconomist. And I walked out of the meeting, and these were incredibly intelligent, compassionate, thoughtful finance officials. But it didn't feel quite right that I, as a macroeconomist, was the one explaining malaria, because I only know a little bit about malaria. But this, given it's one of the lead causes of mortality, child mortality, and it has much deeper economic consequences throughout the continent, must be at some point considered basic knowledge. And so what we've done in the course of this commission is identify so many pieces of what must be considered basic knowledge in agriculture, in climate change, in engineering, and so forth. And it's been, in many ways, inspirational to see throughout the global network how many people agree with that concept. And we used the global classroom in the first instance to think through our own concepts at the level of a microcosm. What does it look like to build a survey course around these elements of basic knowledge? And we had a dozen institutions across a dozen time zones, as Jeff was just saying, coming together every week. Now we're in round 2 of that. And just as one example, on Tuesday morning, we had Yi Chong, who had just got off a plane from his meeting in Kenya, where he's advising the government on its science policy, had flown back to Malaysia, got in front of the webcam, was talking about energy policy. And then we had, in addition to the classrooms around the world, we had officials in the Mexican Ministry of Energy talking about how they're dealing with energy policy right now. They were both learning and contributing. This was amazing. And we've had many such instances because the notion of what should be considered basic knowledge has really taken off, I think, for the generalist development practitioners who draw upon the lessons of the specialists. And one of the other pieces that has been a real learning of this is that technology that allows that global classroom connection, we discovered cost about $1,500 in the first instance for all those connections around the world. This is not high-tech video conferencing. This is literally webcams plugged into computers and an internet connection. And there are hiccups and there are bumps, but the rate of the cell phone connectivity and the information connectivity is expanding so quickly that we were able to connect with Mekele in northern Ethiopia or Ibadan in Nigeria at the same time as we were able to connect with Tsinghua in Beijing and University of Malaya in Malaysia, and Emory, of course, in Atlanta. And this really has become a global conversation. So what I'm about to describe, I want to stress, is just one piece of that global conversation. And this really is meant to be an open source approach with what we're doing here at Columbia. So the recommendation of launching the global network of Masters in Development programs as a core, we thought we should put ourselves on the line first as guinea pigs to figure out what that might look like here at Columbia. And Dean Coatsworth, Dan McIntyre I think Dan is still here, and Steve Cohen played a crucial role in getting us to where we are, so I'd like to thank them for pushing this forward. But what we're going to be doing is launching in 2009, the next fall, the first graduate program. And if you want to look at the basic content, it's Table 3, which is on page 34 of your text. This is the recommendations of the Commission. What we're doing is pretty close to that. We're starting as a first step en route to that, and we assume that we'll be refining, continuing to improve, and continuing to strengthen, especially as the other aspects of the global network come together. We'll have probably 20 to 30 students next fall within the broader MPA program design of SIPA here at Columbia, the School of International and Public Affairs, working very closely with the Earth Institute. And these students will be taking a core curriculum based on, in fact, many courses that are already available throughout the university, drawing from the School of Public Health, the School of Engineering, leaders in tropical agriculture, economics, and SIPA itself. And we'll also be focusing very explicitly on the global nature of the curriculum that we aim to build. So we'll be continuing the global classroom, which, as I mentioned, is happening now. I think we'll probably be on a fall schedule here for that to continue. And that will be a growing centerpiece of, I think, this global effort. There will be a very important practical programmatic training aspect to this. And here at Columbia, but not exclusively at Columbia, we'll be taking advantage of our work through the Millennium Villages Project for rigorous, integrated, well-supervised, and coherent internship programs so that the students can get the basic exposure to integrated development problem solving on the ground, connecting with the local teams and part of a broader global network unto itself. The global system and network of the whole enterprise will be facilitated by a secretariat here at Columbia. And the secretariat will be led by Dr. Lucia Rodriguez, who, if you could stand for a moment, please, Lucia. Lucia, we are blessed to have discovered and found over the summer, as brings tremendous background in working in the international policy environment and international education programs, and has the perk of being a graduate of Teachers College as well. So understands the systems deeply, but will be working closely with all of the programs around the world to develop this common content, shared set of standards, and a basic approach to open source curriculum and global connectivity and global internships and practical training. Now, one thing I'll just add is that this starts with the Masters in Development Practice, but it certainly doesn't end with that. We think of that as the flagship, but it's a much broader agenda. So we are aiming over time to support other mid-career and higher-level graduate training programs. Our colleagues at PEPM in Columbia are actively pursuing this as the kind of professional training for economic policy managers. But we assume and expect that as the programs grow around the world, and we're aiming for a critical mass to get off the ground in the next couple of years, that there will be a broad interest, as we've already identified, in having higher-level training programs. We're also working with institutions like CARE, as Jeff mentioned, UNICEF, the Canadian International Development Agency, to think through with them how they can integrate these basic ideas for their own professional staff development. What forms of certification and training could be put in place for the senior manager, who is the ultimate development generalist practitioner, to actually have some set of basic criteria for their own advancement within their organizations. Because just as the science doesn't slow down from year to year, nor should the professional requirements to understand the latest evidence slow down from year to year throughout a career. So we're, again, I can only say, extraordinarily pleased to be part of such an amazing global network that has contributed to this. You have the names officially of the commission members on the back of your report, but there are hundreds of people around the world who contributed to this process, hundreds of students, hundreds of professionals, hundreds of academics who are part of a much broader consultation process that fed into our thinking and the final words such as they are. But perhaps most of all, I'm next delighted to introduce Dr. Patchi Paccheri, who I think no one could possibly better embody the challenges of science, policy, understanding the complexities of developing country, developed country, and the basic dynamics of integrating science into practice, policy, and implementations on the ground. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and if I could hand it over to Dr. Paccheri.
Thank you, John, for that excessively generous introduction. Well, actually, I'm not surprised that this concept and this idea has succeeded so well so far, because I think it had three essential ingredients. It had an innovator, and that's you. You had a mentor and a guru, the peer of whom you can't find anywhere in the world, and that's Jeff Sachs. And then we also have what one might call an enlightened and receptive patron, and that's the president of the MacArthur Foundation. So I think all of these having come together with distinguished commissioners, all except one, that's me, this had to work. And if you go back in history, Christopher Columbus was able to find the U.S. because he had a patron like Queen Isabel of Spain. If she hadn't given him support, he wouldn't have got anywhere. Well, let me talk about India. As far as we are concerned, we have something which is very different from other parts of the world, and that's what you might call the population dividend. India is today a society where youth are really dominant in the demographics of that country. And this poses a challenge which I think is larger in dimension and perhaps much more complex, because you really have to shape the lives of people. You've got to move them in a direction that would lead to sustainable development. We also have the ingredients of what you might call a strong desire to form a knowledge society. And I think I've been reflecting on this. One reason why this has happened is because of the success of the IT industry. And that's really inspired everyone. It's fired everybody's imagination towards getting skills that might help knowledge be converted into development and welfare. So these are two assets. Industry, as it happens at this point of time, is dynamic, is doing well by and large, although I believe because of this downturn in the economic system worldwide, there's been a decline in industrial output. I was just looking at the news this morning. But policymakers, I'm afraid, have been very slow to grasp some of these changes. And nor have they really come to understand the kinds of challenges that we're going to face on account of emulating a pattern of development that has basically emanated from Britain and North America. And that, to me, would be quite disastrous. I think India, with the numbers that we have, the limited natural resources that are available to us, has to fashion a totally different pattern of development. And this is something that's absolutely crucial, because we have very limited time in which we can bring about a transition and a change in thinking. And if we don't do that, then clearly the results could be extremely harmful. We would have a society that's terribly divided, because there'll be very few rich people, very rich people, and a very, very large number of extremely poor people. I might also add that as far as climate change is concerned, it's going to change everything that we have become accustomed to in South Asia, because climate change is going to impact on the availability of water. Our glaciers are melting very rapidly, and we have estimated in the IPCC, I can mention that something like 500 million people will be affected as a result of reduced water supplies through the river systems of the northern part of the subcontinent. We have increasing droughts, floods, and our bodies of water are terribly polluted. That's largely because of an unsustainable administration of development. And as a matter of fact, without going into further details, climate change is going to mess up everything, particularly for the poorest of the poor, because the large majority of farmers in India are basically dependent on rain-fed agriculture. And the rainfall pattern is changing very, very rapidly. And therefore, I think we need to come up with a pattern of development that enables and facilitates the growth and survival and sustainable development of that section of society. Now, we, as it happens, have the wrong combination of skills among development planners at this point of time. And I think this is something that the Commission has brought out very clearly. In fact, our own regional assessment that was carried out largely by a colleague of mine, Dr. Arvind Mishra, also shows that we have a lack of institutionalized and structured pattern of training and creating skills and knowledge. My institute, which is, I would say, perhaps one of the largest developing country institutions dealing with issues of sustainable development, also has a university which incidentally has moved into a new campus. As of 3 weeks ago, the President of India opened the campus. And we're an institution that likes to practice what we preach. So this particular entire campus is 60% more energy efficient than a conventional building of the same size. We have another training complex which uses no power from the grid. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think it's very important to create the conditions and provide the wherewithal by which people understand what it is to actually conceptualize and practice sustainable development. And here, may I say that a program of this kind is absolutely crucial for the development of a populous, diverse society like India. Because if we don't accept this challenge, then I'm afraid we would be in the hands of what you might call semi-informed amateurs who incidentally run the civil service, no disrespect meant to any of them, in our country. And in fact, in 2 days I'm going to be giving a talk on this subject in the memory of our first Deputy Prime Minister, who was a remarkable administrator. The last point I'd like to make is... The last point I'd like to make is we in the Delhi University has been running a training program supported by the Government of India for in-service officers with up to 20 years of service. And this is a 2-year master's program, of which 2 months are spent in the US, in the University of Texas at Austin, and a short while at Yale. And while it certainly helps to train people at that level, I think it's extremely important to cater to a younger set of entrants into the service, because I think that's the period when they are really receptive to ideas and can imbibe a lot of the learning that is imparted to them. So I'm very happy to be part of this, and I'd like to congratulate those who have brought about this development in such a short period of time, and I'm sure this program will be a roaring success. Thank you.
Let me quickly introduce another leader on the International Commission, Freddie Kosiga, who is a world-leading agronomist. He's now at the African Development Bank, a coordinator who's going to help produce the African Green Revolution. He's been a leader in African agronomy and science for many, many years, a very good friend and colleague in many ventures, and it's a thrill to have you here, Freddie, for the launch, and also we thank you so much for being a leading member of the Commission.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, audience. To me and to us in Africa, the challenge the Commission is putting ahead of us is quite formidable, and we welcome the recommendations. Not like India, where they are semi-informed decision makers, we have uninformed decision makers, especially at the district level. When you decentralize and say resources the district, and the district says, we have enough resources, but we don't know what to do. We have allocated for the roads, we have allocated for the schools, where do we put the money? So they asked me, one of the districts in Tanzania, we want to give you the money. I went back and said to the district council, where does your women get firewood? Well, about 10 kilometers from the forest, somewhere there. Where does your livestock get water? We have to do transhumance and send the livestock very far away for 6 months. Where do you sell your livestock? Oh, we just transfer them to the next railway station about 20 kilometers. So I asked myself, what does sustainable development here really means? These are the people whose decisions affect millions of lives of people. And yet, they've been given resources without knowledge. And they just want to squander the resources. Africa is not lacking money to develop. Jeff will attest to this, and others. It's lacking the ideas and knowledge to make this money work for the poor and to make sustainable development be realized by the same people that he's talking about, the women, the children, and those living in rural areas without access and being neglected by all these things we're talking about: energy, food security, natural resource degradation, and the climate change that is already happening. This is what sustainable development will mean, and this is what this Commission's report really highlights for us. I'm very happy that the Commission's recommendations really touch on a very, very major area: leadership. It touches on science. it touches on technology, it touches on policy. For us in Africa, a very diverse continent, which is many time zones, different languages, different political orientations, Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone, to be able to have commissioners and people to work with you in this big setup was very, very good. And the feedback I'm getting is that the commission will be overwhelmed by the requests from the different universities after we've continued explaining what this is all about. I just want also to bring to your attention that recently, during the course of this commission, one of the presidents of a country in Africa was heard on radio and quoted by newspaper media saying, for me to appoint a permanent secretary, these are the people who allocate resources, they must have an MBA. And when we look at the analysis on table 1 in the paper, we say an MBA is one part of a small puzzle. The MDP is much bigger. So we think we have an opportunity to influence policy and leaders at that level to really make a difference. I would like to thank Jeff and John here and MacArthur Foundation for giving me this opportunity, plus the leadership of the African Development Bank. But I think the most important area for me is that knowledge in Africa is needed to build this pyramid. We have a pyramid, we have leadership at the top, but then the bottom, the base, the capacity is lacking. We don't want this pyramid to crumble. As we push through knowledge at this level, let us also think what happens at the base of the pyramid. If the base of the pyramid is weak, then the top cannot hold. I want to thank the commissioners. I want to thank my colleagues. Mr. Gulam is here from Accra, came to support us. And also all the people we asked in Africa to make sure this thing works. And I want to assure you, MacArthur Foundation Chair, that Africa is ready, Africa is willing, Africa is dying for this knowledge. We are really in dire need because leadership there is lacking, and we need this kind of tools, help from our friends. It's our responsibility to develop Africa, but the help from friends, this kind of knowledge will take us a long way. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
If you could just stand up for a moment, please.
Well, let me thank all the commissioners who've spoken so eloquently this morning and all who have worked so hard to craft this document, which I can say exceeds my highest expectations when this enterprise began. This is a brilliant piece of work that is going to change how development professionals are trained, and through that change will bring a better world for millions of people, millions and millions of people. So I thank you for your vision, your passion, and for the concreteness of your recommendations. Some reports are lofty and have soaring rhetoric, but are short on how to get it done. This has both. The Commission's diagnosis of what makes a good development professional resonates profoundly with MacArthur's experience in the developing world in the 60 places where we operate. We know that many of the 500,000 women, one every minute, who die giving life can be saved through a package of interventions, simple, cost-effective interventions addressing major causes such as postpartum hemorrhage. We know that biodiversity conservation depends on adaptation to climate change, and that science can help us locate protected areas in resilient places. We know that massive human rights abuses can be spotted easily and early using satellite imaging in the sky and simple technology on the ground. And we know that poverty, population, health, conservation, human rights are all interconnected, requiring a sustained and comprehensive intervention. And if I had any doubt about that, my visit to the IUCN, the largest Global Congress of Conservation Specialists in Barcelona earlier this week brought that home. The theme was climate change. I was pleased to announce a MacArthur major initiative in helping adapt to climate change, and it was clear, listening to the conversation, that those in the environmental field understood the linkage between preservation of plants and animals, but also the desperate need to alleviate poverty and to help mitigate the effect on climate change, not just on the natural world of plants and animals, but also on people who are also affected. So I think we're in agreement that we need development professionals who understand the complexity of which I just spoke, appreciate how science and technology can help, know that management matters, and who have seen firsthand the challenges of working in places of extreme poverty and strife. The Commission has given us this blueprint for training a new generation. It is a call for action that should not gather dust on a shelf, as so many Commission reports have done. And I'm here to say that MacArthur is firmly committed to translating this vision into a new reality, and you all are present at the creation of something. And you will look back 5 years hence and say, I was in the room when this all began.
Remember that.
So today I announced that MacArthur is committing a further $15 million over the next 3 years to commit and that money will be devoted to stimulating the adoption of this report in practice. We're hoping that at least 12 universities in the near run, starting with Columbia next fall, will put this set of recommendations into practice. About 2/3 of those universities we hope will be in the developing world. We warmly encourage partnerships between universities in the developed world and the developing world, but also a point made in our phone conversation this morning, regional clusters in the developing world as well. And we will announce later this month an open request for proposals. The proposals will be due in March of 2009 for a decision in June of next year, with the new programs beginning in 2010. Columbia will start earlier, so there'll be a road test of the idea here at Columbia. And then there'll be a second round of proposals for programs to start in the fall of 2011, and those proposals will be due in December of next year. We'll make the decision on the winners with the help of an independent outside review committee, and we'll be underway. And our passionate belief is that the challenge of successful, sustainable development cannot wait for another generation. We need to get this generation ready to go on the ground soon. This is an urgent challenge. It wears a human face, and we believe that it's possible, practical, and imperative for us to make progress toward better health, greater justice, and more robust opportunity, and now, not a generation from now. And we're convinced that this program will move us along that path. And we think that a new generation of well-developed, well-trained development professionals can make a difference, no question. So let me conclude with some words from Kofi Annan delivered in Lisbon last year when he said, "We're all bound together as human beings. If we remain indifferent to the suffering of others, we are only depriving ourselves of our own humanity. We need to act together as humanity for humanity, and now is the time. And now is the time, and let this process begin right here today." Thank you.